So, on behalf of the Boys Upstairs show and the Irish Punt, we are delighted to announce our guest speaker, Marcus Grant from the NFL media team. How's it going, Marcus? How are you?
It's good, man. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the invitation. I wish we had more trade stuff to talk about, but the trade deadline was sort of a dud.
Oh, we got plenty to talk about. Don't worry. So, for fans who don't know who Marcus is, and I don't know how you don't, Marcus is huge. Marcus joined the NFL media team in 2011 and has since become one of the biggest figures in fantasy football and a guy that I trust wholeheartedly with my fantasy football team. Can't, yeah, whatever you say, Marcus goes, honestly. So, rolling off of that, like, look, Marcus, last night we had Monday Night Football, Chiefs and Giants. It was not the most convincing victory for the Chiefs. Is it time to press the panic button with the Chiefs? How do you feel about that whole situation?
I'm not pushing the panic button yet, but I'm definitely concerned. There are a lot of things that are not great about this offense right now. Patrick Mahomes he's been less than great. Let's start there, right? I think he's thrown an interception in 7 straight games now. The last few games have not been particularly good. I think he had about 14 fantasy points last night. The week before, he had that awful game against Tennessee. He had like 7 fantasy points. The offense just is not the same high-powered attack we're used to seeing. I think some of it is, I think some of it is just that they have relied so much on Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill the last couple of years that teams are starting to say, well, let's take those guys away and let's see what happens there. I think it also has helped that Travis Kelce, for as good as he's been, I don't know if maybe he's slowing down or what the deal is, but he certainly has not been, unstoppable like we've seen in the past. But beyond that, they're struggling to find another option in the passing game, right? We've seen every now and then Mecole Hardman steps up. They went out and signed Josh Gordon, and his big season is just so far in the rearview mirror. It's really hard to kind of connect it to anything. I don't know. We can throw any names at Demarcus Robinson, Byron Pringle, all that. They just haven't found that extra spark in the offense. So now all of a sudden, teams are starting to figure out a little bit how to slow them down. I'm not out on the Chiefs yet, but like I said, I think there are some things that need to be fixed, and you start to wonder whether or not the Chiefs that we've seen in the last month, if this is how it's going to be for the rest of the season.
Awesome, Marcus, and it's a pleasure for you to be here. And I just wanted to ask, who's your most surprised breakout player of this year? Guys like Ja'Marr Chase, Cordell Patterson have had fantastic seasons. So just somebody that you are very surprised at how well they've done this year.
It's probably Cordero Patterson, but Ja'Marr Chase is up there as well. Patterson, I will say that I have him on a couple of teams. I drafted him. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and pretend that like I just knew that this was coming. When I drafted Cordero Patterson, it was, hey, he looks like he's the backup to Mike Davis. Let me just throw a dart at him here in the last round of my draft and just see what happens. And then it turns out that he has been just bananas all year long. So that, I think, was more kind of good luck than any sort of, actual advanced scouting on that sort of thing. But it's amazing what the Falcons have done with him. And one of our researchers, Matt Okada, who does a lot of great fantasy work for a bunch of different sites, I had him on my podcast early in the season, and he made a good point that the one thing we knew about Patterson is that he was excellent as a punt and kick returner, maybe one of the best that the NFL has ever seen. And so it just seems like what the Falcons have done is we're just going to get you the ball out in space, and we're going to let you use those kick return skills just as a running back or a wide receiver. And it's worked out incredibly for them. So that's been fun to see. The thing with Ja'Marr Chase, it wasn't that I thought he couldn't be good. I liked Devontae Smith a little better. I thought that with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd in Cincinnati, that they would sort of all kind of cannibalize each other a little bit. That really hasn't been the case. It's been mostly the Ja'Marr Chase show. And maybe I should have leaned heavier on the whole, Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, LSU connection. Maybe I should have leaned into that a little bit more. I didn't. So I thought he'd have a decent year. I didn't think he would be doing exactly what he's been doing so far, but it's been a whole lot of fun to watch, especially if you were smart enough to draft him anywhere.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I know we keep saying this, but thank you for coming on, Marcus.
Yeah, of course,
it's awesome.
guys.
Awesome to see you. Big fan. I want to start by saying I know you do your Tuesday night sleepers every week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to ask you to spoil anything, but maybe give us one guy, some kind of breadcrumb. Doesn't even have to be a sleeper to watch out for this week. Who do you think can have a breakout game?
I would say, let's just say there's a receiver in Los Angeles who let's say, how can I say this without giving it away? Let's say his name rhymes with Stan Pefferson. And I say that partially because I've liked him all year. He was another guy that I was drafting in late rounds. And he has done pretty much what I expected, right? Like, obviously, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are going to get most of the opportunity in that offense. By the way, I've pretty much spoiled it. It's Van Jefferson, in case you guys didn't follow along. I mean, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods are going to get most of the work in that offense the whole time. But I liked him as a third option in what I thought was going to be a really explosive offense. And that's what he's turned out to be. And now, especially when you look at the Deshaun Jackson situation that he wants out, and the Rams, I think, are pretty much ready to sort of move on from him. That means there's less competition here. Tutu Atwell is not a factor anymore. So this is pretty much, it's a pretty much Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Van Jefferson show. So you're not going to use him necessarily every week. But when the matchups are right, you absolutely can. So I think this is a good week for Van Jefferson to, if you don't have him, go get him. I know he's available on NFL.com. I think he was available on like 98%.
He's available on mine. Yeah.
Yeah. He's available like 98% of leagues, which sort of blows my mind because we all want parts of the Rams offense. And there's a guy that's just hanging out there and nobody's going after him. So pick him up, play him when the matchup is right, stash him when it's not. I just like what he offers.
Yeah, I like that because I saw him. I had to make an injury drop this week, and I was looking. I saw him available. And I already have Cooper Kupp, who has been historic for
Lights
me.
out, right?
He's the reason I've won most of my matches. But I do agree with you because a lot of the time there's receivers like that who can randomly get one 60-yard touchdown or something, and in a PPR league that's 13 points right there. Yeah. But I like that.
Yeah, I mean, what you want for those guys, you want those guys who can get you decent numbers on not a whole lot of, because they're not going to get a ton of targets, right? You're never going to have a game where Van Jefferson, if there's a game where he gets 10 targets, something might have gone wrong, right? Like something didn't go right for the Rams. But you want a guy who can be productive on a small number of targets. And like, look, if you're putting him in as a flex and you're getting 12, 13 points, that's a pretty good day.
That's what you want. I love that take completely. So we're talking about sleepers. How about guys who have struggled this year? And a guy who I really think who I had high expectations for was OBJ. Odell has really struggled this year. And like, what do you make of this whole situation? Is it time for like us old school fancy football fans to finally get him out of our lineups, or do we keep rolling with and trust faith in OBJ?
No, I think it's time. Sadly, I said, and so I came into the year not sure what to do about Odell, and just because I felt like the range of outcomes was so wide, my final stance on him by the time we got to August was, there will be games where he sort of looks like the old Odell Beckham Jr. and he puts up big numbers. There will be games where he's just going to leave you so frustrated and angry because he's not going to do anything. It seems like we've gotten more of the bad than of the good right now. And there just don't seem to be any easy answers with the Browns offense. We know when everybody's healthy, they want to run the football a lot. So that already sort of works against him. But, Baker Mayfield not being completely healthy. I mean, I don't know. It's sort of a wild take here, but maybe you want your starting quarterback to have 2 healthy shoulders. I don't know. I'm just spitballing.
No, I like
that. That's just the thing. So, I mean, Baker's not completely healthy. The play calling has been sort of up and down. The offense has been inconsistent. So I think Odell's a guy that, especially because he didn't get traded. I know that was a thing that we talked about on our pod earlier this week. If he were to get traded somewhere else, maybe you hang on and you hope that things are going to get better. He's still in Cleveland. I think right now you're at least keeping him on your bench, and depending on what your options are out on the waiver wire, maybe you're letting him go. But I don't see some sudden resurgence where he's going to catch fire in the second half. He may have a game or two in the second half of the season, but I just don't see it being sustained.
Well, Marcus, that was not the answer I was hoping for.
Sorry.
I'm in a 16-man league. I have
Well, then
Terry McLaurin.
You probably
Terry
do have to
McLaurin.
hold on to him. I mean, if you're in a 16-team league, like, you don't. Yeah, you. There's really gonna be nobody else out there on the waiver wire. So you're
nobody.
Sort of,
like, I might be picking up that Sham Jefferson, whoever that guy was. You know, he might be in my roster.
Yeah, I mean, like, so Odell, Allen Robinson. I mean, maybe Robbie Anderson. These are guys that, like, certainly with Beckham and Robinson, they're guys that I like to call them. They're anchors on your roster, right? Because, and not in a good way. They're anchors in the sense that, like, they're just weighing you down because they're not giving you any production. You're afraid to drop them because of who they are, but you can't trade them because nobody's going to give you anything for them. So you're just left with these guys just sort of like weighing down your roster like a boat anchor, and you just can't really go anywhere with them.
No, I completely agree. It's rough. It's rough.
Yeah.
So Marcus, obviously you're an expert, so this has probably never happened to you, but my favorite part of playing fantasy football every year is the punishment that happens to the person who comes in last. So our league for our show this year was the person who loses has to spend 24 straight hours in an IHOP, and every pancake takes an hour off the total. So I just wanted to hear one of your favorite things that you've heard people have had to do through your history.
So that's kind of like the Waffle House thing, right? Because there was a guy that had to do the Waffle House for 24 hours, which, by the way, I have a really unhealthy fascination with Waffle House. So, like, that seems like a thing that I'd be like, all right, yeah, let's do this. I think one of the worst things, and I think Matthew Berry wrote about this in his book, was like the league that makes people get a tattoo.
Yeah.
If you come in last. And I think, like, I remember reading that some guy had to get like a Justin Bieber tattoo, like on his hip or something like that. Yeah, it's pretty rough. I did remember I won. I wasn't losing a league, but it was losing a week, like coming in like the lowest score of the week in a league for one of our shows. Actually, I had to put on a fake sumo suit and walk around the lot for a good hour or so. So I was like walking around the building with all my coworkers watching me in this like fake sumo suit, it's like inflatable suit, walking around like an idiot for an hour. That was pretty bad. I did have a league where the last place team would get pelted by water balloons, but right. But the problem is, like, this was a league. I don't know if you've ever been to Fresno, California, but it gets insanely hot in the summer. Like, you know, August is routinely like over 100 degrees. And I'm like, hey guys, this isn't like a punishment. Like, it's hot out here. Like, I wouldn't mind getting hit with a couple of water balloons. Like, this isn't, we got to figure out something new. So I don't know. I'm not in that league anymore, so I don't know what they do now, but I'm like, yeah, like just me getting hit with a water balloon on a really hot day. I don't know. It seems like I'm winning more than I'm losing.
That's what you want. Yeah.
Right.
Love it.
Oh, I was going to go next. Totally forgot it. I'm skipping through our notes here for a second. No. So I was going away from, this isn't even a fantasy question almost. It's more of a just an individual player question. Who so far and could be your MVP this year? I'm split between right now Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. I love both of them. Josh Allen didn't have the best week, but who so far have you think has deserved an MVP title? And who do you think is a guy going through the second half of the season that could make himself a case?
I think if we're talking just like fantasy MVP, I think it's Cooper Kupp right now. I mean, just the numbers he's putting up. Look, it's been a while, and I don't even know off the top of my head. I'd have to go do some research. Like the last time a wide receiver was the number one overall scorer in fantasy, because that's what he is. I mean, he's like 13 points clear of Tom Brady right now, and Brady's been amazing. I think you know, he's very much in the conversation. Sort of a dark horse, I think, for fantasy MVP. I don't think it would happen, but a dark horse would be Jalen Hurts. Simply because, look, people were drafting him kind of in the middle to late rounds, right? Like I drafted him in a lot of spots in the middle rounds, and I never drafted him with the idea of him being my weekly quarterback, but he's become that because, you know, no matter what, he's found a way to get you 20 points. I do think it's funny though, that the game where the Eagles scored, where they scored like 40 something points, 44 points last week against the Lions, that was the first game he doesn't have 20 fantasy points, right? Like the game where the Eagles go just berserk on offense, Jalen Hurts gets you like 11, and like, what? How'd that happen? But so he would sort of be my dark horse. I think a guy, though, the second half of the season who could get into that conversation is Darrell Henderson. So, stay with the Rams there. They've got a really nice schedule the rest of the way.
Oh, yeah.
And what we weren't sure about was whether or not the Rams are going to have one sort of workhorse running back. I don't think this would have been the case if Cam Akers stayed healthy. I think Akers would have gotten a lot of the work, but I think Henderson would have still had a role. But when you look at the guys behind Darrell Henderson now, I mean, they made the trade for Sony Michel, who's been, kind of a nice change of pace occasionally. But beyond that, the guys they had were either, late round draft picks, undrafted guys. That's why we've seen Darrell Henderson get, 80% of the snaps most weeks. And if that continues in an offense that's been so efficient throwing the football, that you've got to really pay attention to that. That means you're not going to see, 7, 8, 9 guys in the box against Darrell Henderson, because you got to worry about Kupp and Woods and everybody, combined with the schedule down the stretch. He's a guy that I would really try to see if you can acquire him in a trade. You may have to pay up for it, but it's worth it if you can, because I do think he's going to have a really good run the rest of the way.
Love it.
It's interesting. Yeah, I can see that happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the fact you've just mentioned the Rams there, because this is my next question for you. You've teed it up beautifully. Look, we've just seen the superstar Von Miller trade over to the Rams. Are like the Rams your favorites to win the Super Bowl, or do my Dallas Cowboys have a glimmer of hope? What's your take on that?
No, the Cowboys do. They definitely do have some hope.
Okay.
Obviously, they need Dak to be healthy.
Yeah. Well, Cooper Rush was convincing.
Cooper Rush was good.
He was good.
Cooper Rush is sort of like, how do I describe it? It's like a food that you can only eat like a little bit of. Right, we're like, like, hey, like this, I don't know, this weird flavored ice cream, like it's cool for a couple of scoops, but like now I have a whole like vat of it, like I don't want it anymore. Like that's Cooper Rush.
Yeah.
But they do. They're offensively, they're very, very good, and credit Dan Quinn this year for really turning them around defensively, because that's where the biggest change has been. I mean, Trayvon Diggs has been out of his mind all year long, so they're very much in it. But I did say before the season, I liked Rams against the Chiefs. One half of that is actually living up to its to its promise. The other half, maybe not so much. So I thought Matthew Stafford was going to help get them over the hump there, and now they go out and they add Von Miller. Which, like, side note, my wife was over the moon about this, because she's a Rams fan who also sort of got to meet and kind of become friends with Von Miller a little bit.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she used to work on the show Dancing with the Stars, and she worked there the year Von Miller was actually on the show, one of the contestants, and so they kind of became friends. So now that Von Miller is coming to LA, like when I told her the news, she lost her mind. So I think you take that offense, you add one more piece on defense.
It's a scary defense as it is. I mean, if I'm a quarterback looking at that, I'm going Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, like, oh my God, that's enough. Add Von Miller into that mix. Oof.
It's terrifying, right? It's so good luck to the Titans. They're the first team up against this new defense. So I really do think that they can get there. I think, obviously the added benefit for them of being able to play a Super Bowl in their own stadium after the Bucs did it last year, I think is super extra motivating for them.
Love it.
I loved you channeling the Colin Coward on that ice cream take with Cooper Rush.
So Marcus, you just teed it up again. So with the news about the Derrick Henry injury and Adrian Peterson signing with the Titans, is he worth picking up in fantasy? And do you think that he can be a weapon this year?
I think he's worth picking up. Obviously this goes without saying, but his best days are certainly behind him. But I think he'll get some work, and I think his upside is I expect that they're going to use him near the goal line. But yeah, there will also be, I think, a pretty good amount of Jeremy McNichols still sprinkled in. I think he actually had more targets than Derrick Henry does, so they will use him in the passing game occasionally. I think that's going to increase. I don't know that either one of them is going to just dominate the snap share or the touches back there. I think Henry had something like 55% of the Titans' total touches. I don't expect that they're just going to pivot and take, that 55% of touches and then split it up between McNichols and Peterson. I do think you're going to see them throw the ball more. I think this certainly helps AJ Brown. Maybe it helps Ryan Tannehill. It hopefully would help Julio Jones if he could get and or stay healthy.
Yeah.
I say that with a little bit of bitterness because I have him on a few teams this year. So I think everybody sort of picks up the slack a little bit because there's no way that you can easily replace what you're losing when you lose a guy like Derrick Henry. It's just impossible. So everybody eats a little bit. So it's worth picking up Peterson. Just sort of looking at the matchup. Like I wouldn't play him this week against the Rams, but down the road, if you see some other matchups, then I think it's worth getting him in there.
And what do you think of like a few of the pass catchers for the Titans now, with the fact Henry's out of the game? Do you think AJ Brown will see an already increased role? Like he's already seen lots of targets. Do you think that's just going to skyrocket again now with the Henry injury?
I think so. I mean, I think you just have a higher reliance on him. I know Mike Vrabel said that they don't expect the offense to change much, and that seems a little bit silly because I don't know how you don't change your offense when you lose an absolute game changer like Derrick Henry. So I do think you see more for AJ Brown. Like I said, I think Julio sees some more action, but who knows? Maybe we see more of like Nick Westbrook-Akine. Maybe if you're in a 16-team league, maybe you go pick him up. But
Marcus, that's exactly why I'm asking that question. AJ Brown starting this week.
maybe you go pick up Nick Westbrook-Akine if you're in a really deep league. I think if you're in a 10 or 12-team league, I don't know that makes enough of a difference to move the needle.
Solid take.
So unfortunately, this question was not teed up. And speaking of bitterness, I'm a Bears fan, so that's enough said right there.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, right. So I wanted to ask you something about them. And don't be afraid to break my heart. I've heard everything that you can hear bad about them already. So I find myself kind of conflicted because they have an offense and it's frustrating because they have talent on it. And you said earlier, like Allen Robinson, and is like OBJ right now. He's a household name that can't get the job done. But what I'm seeing is a little bit of that. They're not targeting him like a receiver like that should be and like a high caliber receiver should be. And I feel like that's kind of stalling their offense, especially when a defense comes in and doesn't have to game plan for a heavy game plan on Allen Robinson, who is a scary receiver to face against to play against when he's doing well. But yeah, what do you think is the issue with that he's not playing or even getting treated on his team like a number one receiver?
You know what? If I knew a definite answer to that, I would probably be making a lot more money than I do right now. I can't, I don't know. I mean, I thought it was a breath of fresh air last week when they let Justin Fields just kind of go out and be Justin Fields a little bit. Like part of what had been frustrating was that they weren't letting him use his athleticism. It was almost like he took over and Matt Nagy just said, you know what? Here are all the Andy Dalton plays. Let's run those. And like, it just didn't make any sense. Last week, we saw him kind of get out of the pocket. I mean, he had that touchdown run, late in that game. That was incredible, right? And everybody lost their minds because this is what we were anticipating from the beginning from him. Now, the next step is to start integrating Allen Robinson into this offense a little bit more because look, there were two things coming into the year that we knew, or at least we believed we could count on in the Bears offense. It was going to be David Montgomery in the backfield, and it was going to be Allen Robinson catching the football. Montgomery, unfortunately, has been hurt, so that's taken him out of the mix. But you felt like, okay, well, maybe this means they start getting the ball to Robinson a little bit more. And even in a game where Justin Fields goes off and plays well, the Bears put up, 20 some odd points, Robinson still was nowhere to be found. So I don't understand it. And I think it's almost like Matt Nagy and Kevin Stefanski are sort of sharing notes, right? About like, how do we waste our talented receivers? Like what do we do to not get our talented receivers involved? I don't understand it. And I think for Bears fans, especially, it's especially sad because this is the last you're seeing of Robinson. I mean, like
it sucks.
The Bears, I don't think plan to bring him back. I don't think he wants to come back.
I wouldn't. If I were him, I wouldn't either. It seems like they're running him out of town when he's got a lot in the tank and he's got like a lot left to do. It's just super frustrating as a fan.
Yeah, no, I get it. And that was the thing. We always wanted we wanted to pair Allen Robinson with a good quarterback, right? That's the one thing he's never really had in his career. And it seemed like this was going to be the match made in heaven. And it's been worse than it has any other year of his career. Yeah. And nobody can really figure out why.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
It's grim. It is very grim at the moment. I completely agree. We'll lighten the mood a bit though. So I got one final question for you, Marcus. And if anyone has ever asked you this question, I'll be severely disappointed because this is I'm can't wait to hear what you have to say on this. So look, I'm going to paint a picture. You're over in Ireland. There's a pint of Guinness sitting here. There's another pint sitting there. There's an empty chair here. Any past or present NFL player can come through that door. You send them an invite. They're going to come. Who are you going to ask and why?
Ooh. Well, first off, no one has ever asked me that question. So congratulations on that. My first thought is Marcus Allen. For a couple of reasons. One, he was for the longest time my favorite football player. Partially because he was the first other person I ever knew of who was also named Marcus. Like when he was, I think his rookie season, I think I might've been like 4 years old. Like that was about the time I started watching football with my dad. And I remember him pointing out this guy on the field wearing the Raiders jersey named Marcus. And it blew me away. I was like, wow, there's somebody else named Marcus out here. Like that's kind of cool. But then, as I watched him more, I realized that he was just a really good football player. And so then the other part of why I would invite him is to so I actually met Marcus Allen once. I went to USC. He obviously played and won the Heisman Trophy at USC, and he was back on campus when I was, I might've been a freshman or a sophomore, but he was back on campus signing copies of his new book. And I remember going to the bookstore, waiting in line. Like I bought 2 copies, one so he could sign it for me, one he could sign for my dad. And like I waited in this long line, couldn't wait to get to the front, like so excited to talk to like my football hero, Marcus Allen. I got to like think of something great to say to him. And I get to the front and I hand him my book and I say, so my name is also Marcus. And I'm like, oh. And I'm like that was all I could come up with. He's like, that's cool.
Great.
Yeah. My book, and I just like, and I'm like, I feel like the biggest idiot right now. So part of it would be to ask him just about football and just talk to him about all that, but also to try to like redeem myself for making myself look like an idiot. One time I was in front of him.
The Redeemer. I love it. I think I've had that chat with a few pals, and a few of my guys have gone tight end crazy night out with the tight ends. You bring Kelsey, Kittle, and Gronkowski on a night out, you're probably not coming home. I mean, that would just
probably not. Now, see, my fear is that if I hang out with Marcus Allen, like, does he call OJ? They used to do like, and like that's when things might go sideways. If he shows up.
Oh my gosh. Well, listen, Marcus, thank you so much for your time. Myself, I can't thank you enough. For myself, Tommy, and Sam, we're so thankful to have you on.
Thanks so much, man.
I mean, I gotta say, like, as a young Irish guy, going on the bus to school, 14, 15-year-old me, going through fancy football, just getting into the game, reading your articles, I never would have thought a couple of years later I'd be interviewing you with these great guys. So thanks a million. And as us Irish say, Gurav Mila Mahagut, which means thanks a million. So thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome. No, I appreciate the invitation. I had a great time, fellas. I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
The best.
Awesome. Have a good one, man. Thank you.
Cool.